I've investigated gangs, murders, and fraud, but this case is different. It started as a simple background check. Black transplant patients from low-income communities vanishing post-surgery. They got their life-saving organs, then disappeared. No missing persons reports, no family inquiries. It wasn't right. Hospitals brushed it off. Charities praised the success stories. But I knew something was off. A guy named Raymond Hall caught my attention first. 36 years old, kidney failure, no insurance. He was lucky. The helping hand covered his surgery. The hospital called it a success. But 3 weeks later, his landlord reported him missing after unpaid rent piled up. I pulled up his records. The last thing on file? A scheduled post-op checkup. But no evidence he showed up. No follow-up visits. No prescriptions filled. Just gone. Raymond wasn't the only one. There was Martha Daniels, 62, liver transplant. Vanished. A teenager named Elijah Green, new lungs. Missing. I compiled a list, 12 names, all with the same story. Desperate patient, miracle surgery, total silence. I started knocking on doors. Hospitals dismissed my concerns. Not uncommon, they said. People stop coming to follow-ups all the time. That's true, but usually their family complains or they at least leave some kind of paper trail. These people weren't just unaccounted for. It was like they'd never existed. Social workers were no help either. One woman, mid-40s, told me she used to check in on a few of them. They were fine, healthy, happy even. Then, I don't know, they just stopped answering their phones. She rubbed her arm, glanced toward the hallway like she expected someone to be listening. Doctors were worse. Clammed up the moment I mentioned the helping hand. A surgeon at St. Augustine's even laughed in my face. That charity saves lives, he said, waving me off. You're barking up the wrong tree. But then, I met Nina Morrison, a nurse who used to work with the charity's transplant patients. She had a different reaction. The second I said the name, she flinched. Checked the hallway, just like the social worker had. I don't know much, she stammered. But people talk. I leaned in. Talk about what? She hesitated. We had a patient, Kevin Marshall. He got a heart transplant. Everything went well, but a few weeks later, he came back. Said something was wrong. Not pain, not infection. He just felt different. I scribbled notes, nodded for her to go on. He said his memories felt scrambled, like he couldn't tell which were real and which weren't. He didn't recognize his own reflection. Thought his wife was a stranger. He was terrified. I had heard of transplant patients struggling with psychological effects before, but this was something else. What happened to him? She swallowed hard. The last time I saw him, he was with two men. Not doctors, just men in suits. They said they were helping him. He was crying. Then they took him away. Hier. Where? Her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know, but I never saw him again. That was my first real lead. The charity had been operating for over a decade, assisting thousands of underprivileged patients in getting life-saving transplants. They ran clinics, funded research, and covered costs for those who couldn't afford surgery. Their financials? Spotless. No red flags, no hidden offshore accounts. Every dollar was accounted for. Too clean, too perfect. So I dug deeper, and that's when I found something strange. Raymond Hall, one of my vanished patients, had an official death certificate, dated last month. Cause of death, unknown. But 2 days ago, Raymond Hall had checked into a free clinic in another part of the city. Same birth date, same social security number. A routine checkup for a man who was supposed to be dead. How does a dead man schedule an appointment? I needed to find out. Raymond Hall was supposed to be dead. His name was stamped on a death certificate, his case closed. Yet, 2 days ago, he checked into a clinic. Either this was a clerical error, or someone had gone to great lengths to make him disappear. I found him at St. Joseph's Shelter, a rundown facility for the city's forgotten souls. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sweat, old blankets, and stale coffee. Men and women huddled together on thin mattresses, lost in restless sleep or empty stares. It didn't take long to spot him. Raymond sat in the corner, hunched over, staring at his hands like they didn't belong to him. He looked nothing like his medical records, no longer the well-built man with tired but kind eyes. He was skeletal, his skin stretched thin over sharp cheekbones. I approached slowly, keeping my voice low. "Raymond Hall." His head snapped up. Panic flickered across his face before he caught himself. He shook his head. "Wrong guy. I sat beside him anyway. You had a kidney transplant 2 months ago. You were last seen at St. Augustine's. And you checked into a clinic 2 days ago under your real name." His fingers clenched into fists. "I don't know you," he muttered. "And you don't know me." I ignored the warning. "I just want to know what happened to you. Why did they fake your death?" His entire body stiffened. His lips trembled like he wanted to say something, but he just clenched his jaw. His eyes darted over my shoulder. That's when I felt it. That creeping, electric sensation of being watched. I turned slightly, keeping my movements slow, casual. Across the street, leaning against a parked sedan, were 2 men. 2 clean, 2 alert. They weren't homeless. They weren't cops, either. One wore jeans and a jacket, the other a dark hoodie. They didn't talk, didn't fidget, just stood there, staring. Raymond exhaled sharply through his nose. "You shouldn't have come." His voice was barely above a whisper. His hands trembled. Then he leaned in, his lips just inches from my ear. One word: "Run." Then he bolted. I barely had time to react before he was on his feet, weaving through the shelter like a rabbit fleeing a hawk. The men across the street moved instantly. They weren't confused. They weren't surprised. They were waiting. I watched one of them press a finger to his ear. A call. A signal. Then they moved toward me. I didn't wait. I was out the door before I had time to think, pushing through the crowd, shoving past bodies as I hit the sidewalk. Raymond was already gone. I had no chance of catching him, but I had bigger problems. Footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. I ducked into an alley, heart hammering. The stench of garbage and piss filled my nose, but I kept moving. My car was 2 blocks away. If I could make it. Footsteps behind me. Closer now. I turned a corner and nearly crashed into a delivery truck pulling out onto the street. The driver honked, swearing at me as I darted across the road, narrowly avoiding getting flattened. The moment I reached the other sidewalk, I risked a glance back. The men had stopped at the alley's entrance. They weren't running anymore, just watching, like they already knew where I was going. The offices of the Helping Hand looked exactly how you'd expect from a charity. Bright, open spaces, volunteers in branded polo shirts, walls covered in framed photos of smiling patients. A massive banner hung over the reception desk, because every life matters. It was all bullshit. The receptionist greeted me with a rehearsed warmth. "Welcome to the Helping Hand. How can I assist you?" I introduced myself as an independent journalist covering medical charities. She beamed at that, nodding enthusiastically as she handed me a brochure. "We're always happy to share our mission." I played along, feigning interest as I skimmed through it. The numbers were staggering. Over 5,000 transplants funded in the past decade. No fees, no debt, just a miracle for the underprivileged. That's what they wanted the world to see. I asked for patient records. She hesitated but smiled. "Of course. Let me get those for you." 10 minutes later, I was seated at a sleek glass conference table with a tablet in front of me. Digital case files scrolled under my fingertips. Names, procedures, successful outcomes. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Not a single error in the records. No inconsistencies, no last-minute changes. Every note was crisp, structured, almost rehearsed. Like they weren't written by doctors recording real-time updates, but by someone fabricating a flawless history. And then I saw something stranger. Every patient marked as missing in my own notes had a discharge report from 3 days after surgery. Each one claimed the patient had been fully recovered and voluntarily left the program. I knew that was a lie. I needed an insider. Dr. Leena Patel had worked with the Helping Hand for 3 years. Cardiac specialist. Highly respected. But what caught my attention was her recent leave of absence. When I called, she refused to speak over the phone. "Not here," she whispered. "We'll meet in my car. Parking garage, 5th and Lexington. Come alone." I arrived 10 minutes early. The garage was dim, the buzz of flickering fluorescent lights echoing off concrete walls. Her car, a navy sedan, was tucked into a corner, engine off, windows up. I tapped on the glass. Dr. Patel unlocked the door without looking at me. I slid into the passenger seat, the air inside thick with her nervous breathing. She gripped the wheel, knuckles white. "This was a mistake," she muttered. "You wouldn't have agreed to meet if you thought that." She swallowed. "They'll know I talked." "Ooh." She inhaled sharply. "I don't know who they are, but I know what they do." I waited. She squeezed her eyes shut, as if saying it out loud would make it real. "They don't take organs," she whispered. "They take everything." A chill ran down my spine. I kept my voice steady. "What does that mean?" She finally looked at me, eyes hollow. "I performed a transplant on a man named Elijah Green, 17 years old. Cystic fibrosis. He got a new set of lungs. Everything was routine. No complications, no signs of rejection. Then, 3 days after surgery, the helping hand arranged for him to be relocated. I thought it was for post-op care." She took a shaking breath. 3 months later, I saw him again. I tensed. "Where?" Her voice dropped. "At a gas station." "But it wasn't him." "What do you mean?" "He looked like Elijah. Same face, same build. But the way he moved, it was wrong." Her hands trembled. "He didn't recognize me." I said his name, but his eyes were empty, like he wasn't in there anymore. I opened my mouth to respond, but her face suddenly went white. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the rearview mirror. I turned, reflected in the glass. 2 men. The same ones from the shelter. They were walking toward the car. "Drive," I hissed. Dr. Patel's breathing became ragged. "They found me. Oh my God, they found me. Drive." She fumbled with the keys. Too slow. The door yanked open. I saw the flash of movement, a gloved hand, a glint of metal, before something stabbed into my neck. A needle. Cold liquid surged into my veins. My vision blurred. The world tilted. Dr. Patel screamed. Then, everything went black. I woke up drowning in light. My vision pulsed, blurred at the edges like I was surfacing from deep underwater. The air was thick with antiseptic, sterile but wrong. A steady, rhythmic beeping filled my ears, slow and methodical. Something was restraining me. I tried to move, but leather straps cut into my wrists, my ankles. Panic surged, but my limbs were lead-heavy, weak. A figure loomed over me, silhouetted against the blinding overhead lights. Surgical scrubs, a mask, gloved hands adjusting in 4-line. "You got too close," a voice whispered in my ear. A shiver crawled up my spine. I turned my head sluggishly, eyes struggling to focus. More figures moved around the room. Doctors, nurses, assistants, all operating with a quiet efficiency that felt disturbingly routine. Stainless steel trays gleamed under the lights, filled with neatly arranged scalpels, clamps, bone saws. A ventilator hissed softly in the background. And then I saw them, the storage containers. Rows of them neatly labeled, not just for kidneys or hearts. Larger ones, full body length, the kind used for long-term preservation. My breath hitched. This wasn't an illegal transplant operation. It wasn't just black market organ theft. They weren't just taking organs. They were taking people. A nurse leaned over me. She had soft eyes, almost apologetic, like she was comforting a dying man. "We don't kill people, detective," she murmured. "That's what makes us different." My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. I forced the words out. "Then what? What do you do?" Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. "We improve them." The room swayed. My mind was slipping, the drugs pulling me under again. I fought it, tried to focus. Another voice, male, calm, clinical, spoke somewhere behind me. "Prep him for the exchange." "Exchange?" I struggled against the straps, adrenaline spiking through the fog. A monitor beeped faster. The nurse placed a hand on my chest, gentle but firm. "Don't fight it," she whispered. A shadow moved into my vision, another doctor. He adjusted the 4, watching me with quiet interest. "Most people never wake up before the procedure," he mused. "Interesting." I tried to ask what they were doing to me, but my tongue wouldn't obey. Something cold touched my scalp, fingers tracing the curve of my skull. "You'll be fine," the doctor said, almost to himself. "We only take what we need." I wasn't sure if he meant my organs, or something else. My eyelids drooped. The last thing I saw was the glint of a scalpel descending toward my skin. Then, everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital bed, not in a basement surgery room, not strapped to a table. Just here, a bright, white-walled, impossibly normal hospital room. A dull, rhythmic beeping filled the air, matching the sluggish thump of my pulse. My body ached, but not where I expected. No sharp pain in my abdomen. No stitches. My chest felt heavy, my stomach hollow, like I was missing something vital. Panic flickered in my brain. I tried to sit up. My limbs obeyed, but something was off. The way my muscles responded, the stiffness in my joints. It felt like I hadn't used them in days. A nurse walked in, clipboard in hand, her smile too warm. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson." I froze. "What?" She chuckled. "You had quite a scare. But don't worry. Your procedure was a complete success. You're healing well." She moved closer, checking my foreline with practiced ease. My mind was sluggish, struggling to process her words. "Mr. Johnson." That wasn't my name. I knew my name. I could feel it just below the surface of my thoughts, but somehow it felt distant. My voice cracked. "I need a mirror." Her smile didn't falter. "Of course. There's one in the bathroom, just to your left." I swung my legs over the bed. The cold tile sent a jolt through me. My balance felt wrong, my weight distributed in a way I didn't recognize. My breathing was too shallow. The nurse watched me as I moved. Not with concern, not with sympathy, just curiosity. The bathroom was small, sterile. A sink, a toilet, a mirror above the basin. I gripped the edges of the sink, the porcelain biting into my palms. My fingers felt longer, my grip stronger than I remembered. My heart pounded. I looked up and froze. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. The features were close, too close, as if someone had sculpted my face from memory, but got the proportions slightly wrong. The jawline was a little sharper, the skin smoother, younger. My eyes, no, not my eyes, were lighter than before. I gasped, stumbling back, colliding with the wall. My breath came in ragged gulps. What did they do to me? The nurse appeared in the doorway, tilting her head. "Is everything okay, Mr. Johnson?" I barely heard her. My trembling fingers reached up, tracing the skin of my face, my cheekbones, my lips. It felt real, warm, alive, but it wasn't mine. I ripped open the hospital gown, expecting to see a scar, stitches, something. Nothing. No marks, no incisions, no sign that anything had been touched. Yet, everything was different. I staggered out of the bathroom, heart hammering. "What the hell did you do to me?" The nurse's expression remained eerily calm. "You're still adjusting. That's normal. The transfer takes time to settle." "Transfer?" My head spun. "What transfer? What the hell are you talking about?" She sighed, setting the clipboard aside. "Your body was compromised, detective. We had to make some adjustments. But don't worry, you've been given a better version." My stomach turned. "A better version?" She nodded. "More efficient. Stronger. Cleaner." She smiled again, like this was all perfectly reasonable. My pulse roared in my ears. "What did you do?" She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small tablet, and tapped the screen. A video began playing. It was me, or the old me, lying unconscious on a surgical table. My body pale, lifeless. But beside it, another body, the same one I now wore. A surgeon's voice played through the speakers. Neural transfer at 82%. Retaining key memories. Physical response stable. I stumbled back, ball rising in my throat. They hadn't taken my organs. They had taken my mind. I wasn't in my own body anymore. I had been replaced.